can you smooth a stub nib with micro mesh? Okay, yes, you can. You can. We do it all the time. So micro mesh is this stuff right here. If you don't know, it's a very, very, very fine abrasive. It almost feels like leather. It's such a smooth abrasive, but it's nice for smoothing nibs. And it's oftentimes it will just kind of cut the edge off a sharp nib, and it will get it feeling you know, smooth with just a hint of feedback. It's not glassy smooth with micro mesh, but it gets you pretty well there to where most people like it. A loop helps tremendously. So basically, if you have a stub nib, and this isn't a stub, but just use your imagination. But if you have a stub nib and it's feeling scratchy, the first thing is to check the tines. So you kind of hold it like this, and you just look at it, get it in focus, and you look to see if your tines are aligned or not. So if you're looking straight at it, again, as if you're going to stab yourself in the face, you look at it, and if you're looking at this and it looks completely straight on, okay, that's good, that's what you want. If it's offset like this, that's actually better in this scenario, because then you know that's what's causing the scratch. So you just kind of use your fingernail, bend the tine up just a little bit. So if I'm looking at it and using the loop, I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, that left tine has dropped down a little bit. I'll use my fingernail and kind of press up just a hair. And kind of overbend it a little bit until it falls back into where it's alignment. So if it's down a little bit, I'll kind of press up on this until it's aligned again. Great, and then it should be in good shape. And then I'll kind of, you know, do some figure eights and kind of write it a little bit. And if it feels, usually that will fix it, probably 80% of the time. That alone will make a nib not feel scratchy anymore, especially with stubs. But sometimes still it's like, oh, it just feels like it's cutting a little bit. So if it's properly aligned like that, then that's where you can bring out the micro mesh, and it can really help. So this is where you really want to make sure that your rotation in your hand is not too extreme one way or the other, with a stub especially. Because if you have it over rotated and you're pressing down a little bit to compensate, you're going to end up smoothing out the wrong parts of the nib, and then if it ever is properly aligned or whatever, it's going to be all jacked up. So you want to make sure your pen is properly aligned, you're using just very, very light pressure, and that you are keeping it properly aligned as you do it. So you want to go slow. But basically, there's several different ways you can do it. You can go back and forth with it, you can do figure eights. It's kind of whatever you're most comfortable with. Me personally, I tend to like to do figure eights. It's just more my style. So I'll just lightly do some figure eight patterns. And usually with stubs that are, you know, feeling scratchy, they're not going to feel scratchy all the time. It's usually going to be just kind of in one direction, in one little spot. And we know, like, there must be something on like some of the Yovo machines where it's like there's this one little spot going from like bottom left to top right that we find. It's like, oh, yep, there's that catch. It just kind of catches a little bit. Just very subtle, but you know, that's something that we look out for when we get our nibs in. So as we do it, we're like, oh, yep, there it is. And if you can feel that little spot where it kind of catches, you just kind of go back and forth just on that, in that direction. And that can make a big difference. You do that a couple of times, and you keep a piece of paper. You do this inked up, by the way. With your pen inked up, because that helps to lubricate it a little bit, and also it makes it so that you can immediately go over and do some figure eights on your paper and make sure that it actually is writing like you want. So you do that. So you just kind of do some figure eights, smooth out that one little rough spot, go back to the paper and get it until it's working well. If you really kind of know what you're doing and you practice a little bit, you know, practice on some cheaper nibs if you can. I wouldn't bust out a, you know, Visconti Dream Touch and try it out. But you know, if you have a Metropolitan or something like that, or something Goulet nib even, Noodler's nibs are great because they're very inexpensive to just mess around with doing some of that smoothing and stuff. So that's a good thing. Jinhao is another good thing to try. But that works out pretty well, and you know, you should be able to get it working pretty well if you really know what you're doing. It doesn't take any longer than probably 20 or 30 seconds, honestly. Between the loop, you know, you look at the loop and you're like, oh, yep, that's misaligned. Bend it up a little bit. Okay, that looks good. All right, and then do some figure eights. Oh, yep, there's the spot. Go back to paper, go back to paper, go back to paper. Yep, that's perfect. Boom, done. Literally, that's the whole process. I just took a little longer to explain it in detail. So there you go. Yes, you can smooth a stub. It's really not a vastly different process than smoothing any other nib. You just have to have more attention to detail as far as your hand position, especially as you're doing the smoothing.